Reimagining Success, episode 182. You're listening to Reimagining Success, the podcast where we help you reimagine your future, designing a life and career beyond the 9 to 5 that allows you the freedom, flexibility and fulfillment that you've been dreaming of. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg. Now, let's get started on those dreams. Hello there and welcome back. And this week, we're here for another Ask Anna episode, which means I'm here to answer a question that's come in from the community in some shape or form. And of course, if you have a question, you can get in touch with me on your favorite social channel, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever floats your boat. And you can also use the old school form of communicating via email. So the email is podcast@onestepoutside.com, podcast@onestepoutside.com. And this is for the monthly Ask Anna series. Now, the question I'm answering today, which is pretty pertinent, is how do I choose a business coach? And I had this question on a webinar a couple of weeks ago. Someone in the audience said, you know what, I've been burned, and you may have been as well, you listening right now, or at least I certainly know of a lot of people who have been, by having chosen the wrong business coach. Now, whatever wrong means, right? And we'll talk about that in a moment. But the question, of course, is how can you know that somebody's results are real, that what they're promising you is true, is guaranteed? For example, you know, a lot of coaches will say, these are my sales figures, or at least they say they've made millions and so on. And actually, that's not the same as profit. Of course, if you have any kind of accounting, financial understanding, they could have spent as much as they sold, right? We're not talking actually a robust business model. That doesn't necessarily mean they can teach what they've learned and so on and so on. So how can we know that a particular business coach who seems legit, at least I hope, can actually help you? And this is an important question because we're investing our money, more so maybe even we're investing our time. We're trusting these people with the innermost workings of our minds, of our business and so on. And it's really important that that trust is there and that we feel we're making the right decision for us. Now, the interesting thing about the lay of the land these days, I guess, is that anybody can start putting out content. Anybody can start helping. In fact, coaching as an industry is not regulated like psychiatrists and so on. So although there are bodies like the International Coach Federation and so on, and many of us have trained, certified, attended accredited trainings and so on, and that's really important for ethics, for the skill set and so on. That's not needed. That's not a requirement, which means, unfortunately, that it is a very cluttered market. Now, it's exciting for us all coming out as coaches because it means that we have lots of opportunities and it's quite democratic because we can demonstrate, and this is in fact even what I teach in my materials that I teach, for example, in the course that I'm just launching, that we can actually demonstrate our credibility in a much more democratic way, as it were. So you no longer necessarily need the formal qualifications. You can show your life experience, you have testimonials, you can educate, and based on the credibility that you build through the content you're putting out, you can attract people who want those kinds of results that you're talking about. And so that's really exciting. However, for those of us looking for a coach, and that may be you since you're listening to this podcast, and certainly it's me, it has been me and will be me because I continue to work with coaches, how on earth can we know amongst all these people who's the right one? And to be honest, a little bit selfishly coming back to myself as a coach, it's really hard. I come from a marketing background, and yet it's really hard to put yourself out there in a way where you're going to stand out, where you're going to have the right people get in touch with you, because of course it's a two-way street, right? Like an interview for a job. I always say to people, although that's not my speciality, if you're going to an interview for a job, remember that it's two-way. You're interviewing them to understand if you want to work with that employer in that culture, with those colleagues in that environment, with their values and so on, just as much as they're interviewing you for the role. And the same goes for coaches. In the kind of business I'm building and the kind of business I encourage you and guide you on building as well, I want to enjoy working with people. I want them to share my values. I want them to enjoy working with me. I want it to be a really trusting relationship where I'm having fun doing it, right? As well as working hard, of course. And so then it's a two-way street. But it's really difficult. I think it was last year, coming out of the darkness of my second pregnancy, when I posted in a Facebook group, which is an amazing group. I posted and asked, hey, does anybody know of something like, a personal trainer / nutritionist who specializes in postpartum mums, who's gentle, but also so on and so on. And I think I got like 200 responses on that thread before eventually I had to shut it down, which I've seen other people do. And it just made me realize I very rarely posted my own services and threads like that. But of course, we all want to be helpful. And so if you post in a group, if someone posts, hey, I'm looking for a business coach, which, by the way, is the worst possible question because, of course, the savvy people in the group will say, what kind of coach? What are your goals? What kind of business do you have? What's your experience? What's your level, et cetera, et cetera? It's just far too general. But even notwithstanding that, it's just so vague. And hundreds of us, including me sometimes, will go, yes, hello, this is what I do. Have a look at my website. Nobody has time for that. And to be honest, I'm pretty diligent. I did go through those 200 posts and I looked at everyone and I did eventually work with one of them. And of course, people may search that Facebook group in future. So by all means, post your details if you want to. I'm just trying to illustrate that it's very difficult for you as the person looking when so many people are responding. So that was for a personal trainer and nutritionist. But, business coach, especially when you literally say business coach, is so vast and vague and broad. So how on earth can you choose among those 200 plus people? So if you're like me and if you're diligent enough to go through and look at all the websites and so on, by all means, but that's too many people, right? So look, here's my perspective, my approach to this. There are so many opportunities now to get to know somebody, to, in effect, work with someone before you actually work with them. Let me explain. So I have my podcast. Hello there. You are now listening to my Reimagining Success podcast. It may be the first episode you've come across, in which case, hello and welcome to my community. I hope you will continue to learn from other episodes and join my Facebook group and maybe have a look at my book or join a workshop and so on. The podcast been going for 3 years. I've got my website. I've got blogs from years back. I do have my book and another one coming. I run live workshops now every couple of months. I have a 5-day challenge on escaping the 9 to 5. You can sign up to my emails. You get a weekly email. You can watch my videos on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Instagram. You can watch my reels now because I'm doing fun reels on Instagram. There are so many marketing touch points, as we call them. And again, because I'm constantly thinking of the two-way road here, as a marketing person, as the business coach marketing, they say that you need at least 7 touches before somebody buys from you. I've seen numbers like 16. The true journey might be that you come across this podcast, or I've been a guest on someone else's podcast. So you head on over here and listen to a couple of episodes. Maybe you subscribe. Maybe a few weeks down the line, you hear me talking about the group and you join the Facebook group. Maybe then a couple of months later, you join a workshop. Maybe you sign up to the emails and, it could be months or years later, or hopefully that's a bit more condensed, but it's many, many touch points along before you then might start working with me. Now, there are faster ways. And of course, some people are very intuitive and know right away that they want to work with somebody. But again, coming back to how you can choose a business coach, there are so many opportunities to get to know somebody, to get to work with them before you work with them. So use those opportunities. So to give you a few considerations, I suppose, and the most important consideration is what you want, because ultimately, of course, that's what we're talking here, and it's so important that you have somebody that you want to work with. In fact, your intuition is so critical. But a couple of things to consider. So the style. Now, it's hard to put your finger on that, right? But maybe I speak really quickly and that's intimidated to some people. Or maybe you're really fast and you need somebody who's really on it, and someone who's a little bit slower and more considered might not be able to keep up with the pace that you want. Or you might want the opposite of you. You might want someone who balances you out. I've come across more spiritual coaches, and I had somebody recently who came to a couple of workshops and really loved what we did, but felt that my style wasn't quite right for her. And I totally got that and understood that and wished her well to go and work with a previous coach she'd had before. Someone might have more academic style. Someone might be really action, performance, high octane, and it could be a masculine versus feminine energy and so on. But what kind of style? And it's impossible to know that, or very difficult to know that just right off the bat. So by all means, explore that. Again, have a watch of their videos, have a call with them and so on. So style, but of course credibility as well. As I said a moment ago, it's not just, although it is partly, accreditations and certifications and studies and so on, right? I went to Oxford and I studied a master's and I worked at Procter & Gamble and so on. Now that might not be relevant. I studied international relations. Maybe that's not so relevant, but I do get clients to say, hey, I came from a similar background to you. And speaking of background, that corporate background, of course, gives me a certain relatability to other people who are plentiful, and maybe you yourself as well, who have that similar background. And they understand that I understand the difficulties that come with leaving behind that salary, the advantages of the structure, but also the stress and the cultural, process-driven organization and all those things, right? So I have that background. Others might have been entrepreneurs all their life, and that's a very different background. How long in business have they been? How long have they been in business would probably be more grammatically correct. If they're too far ahead, and I had someone like this who just accelerated whoosh into the stratosphere, they may have forgotten what it was like, the challenges and so on of being earlier in business. But of course, you still want someone to be a role model, to be aspirational. So as an important side step here, coaching, and let's not get into analysis of this, but coaching I was going to say as a science, but it's also an art, coaching as an industry, as a field, is actually pure coaching. Strictly speaking, you don't need any knowledge. And in fact, in a way, it's almost better not to have knowledge of the industry, of the situation. I found when I was doing my coach training that when it was somebody who was talking about marketing or business, I right away wanted to jump in and help. And that's not what a pure coaching experience is about. It's listening, it's asking questions, challenging, and so on, right? However, many of us in particular, when we add the business word in front of business coach, it becomes a combination. And certainly that's the approach I have of coaching with mentoring. And when you're talking about a business mentor, then it is interesting that they have done something that you aspire to do. Now, not exactly, and I hope it never will exactly be what you want, because the whole point is you're forging your own path. But certainly there's an element to having a mentor who has been there, done that. And again, you want them to be aspirational, but not too far ahead. So you're actually checking for both the business experience and skill set and the coaching skills and experience on the other hand. And what about the type of business that they have and the type of business they work with? It's very different to have a solopreneur, freelancer, lifestyle business versus the VC-driven, finance, 100-plus employee startup techie thing, right? I'm on the former spectrum, so the so-called lifestyle business, smaller team, if any team, and often, one person. It's about still making that money and having the financial freedom, but it's really you. It's not about them being tied to have an office and all those employees and funding and so on. And of course, a very important consideration, ethics. And it sort of goes without saying, ethics and integrity, but of course that's really important. So style, credibility, skills, experience, time in business, background, type of business, ethics, right? Those are some of the considerations. So what can you do? Well, look, by all means, start by asking people ask in Facebook group, but just be aware that you will probably be overwhelmed. Check the profiles, have a Google as well, because that's often how people find me. They'll find articles that I've written. And, sometimes you'll find coaches who are paying for ads, which again, isn't necessarily the right coach for you. But again, by all means, check them out. Check and use their free content, read their testimonials. By all means, ask to speak to previous current clients. I rarely have people do this, but a couple of times I have, and I've always, and my clients have always been very willing to speak to them, which I love because I have no idea what they're going to say, but I hope that they will have a very honest conversation about pros and cons and style and so on, and they will then filter the right people who would do well with me, right? So again, it's that two-way street. Use the free consults, whether it's a chemistry call, a perfect fit discovery call, coaching, consultation, whatever it is, use what they offer. That's really the best way to get on board. But I would prefer you, of course, to have done the research before. I've had people book a call with me and they've literally not read the website. They add me on LinkedIn and say, so what do you do? And then I think, well, hang on a second. Why are you adding me? Why are you wanting to work with me if you have no idea even what I do? I've also had a couple of, I think literally 2 people in the 6-7 years or so I've been coaching who've said to me, oh, you're one of 12 coaches I'm speaking to. And I admire that. I really don't mean to be in any way derogatory about this because I think it's so good. And by all means, if that's what you need to do to make that rational decision. But I think there's just a point at which it's information overload. You can't make, as with all these important decisions, in fact, as in choosing the next stage of your career and starting a business and so on, matters of love. We can't make that decision with complete accuracy, complete information. There is always going to be an element of faith, of trust. And if you're starting to have 12 people with, a traffic light scorecard of each of them and so on, I would question whether you will arrive at the right answer. But I'm sure if you've done that due diligence, then certainly you've chosen good people on that list. And if it's not me, which probably won't be if there's 12 people that you're comparing, then, by all means, I wish you well with those choices. But I think, again, ask for recommendations from other people have been successful with coaches, but remember that you're a different person, you have different goals and so on. Check profiles, use content, ask to speak to clients, ask questions. Most people will ask things like, how much does it cost? How many calls do I get? And of course that matters, but really try to challenge the coach more about, okay, well, have you worked with somebody in a similar position? Obviously, you can't expect them to give away all their sort of strategies and so on in a call, but ask them, what do you think I would need to focus on, and what would those 3 months look like together, and what kind of access do I have to you? Some bigger coaches now will kind of delegate you to their minions, so you get to talk to their associates and so on, who, by the way, sometimes can be amazing, but just be aware of what you're signing up to. You're not necessarily getting to work with that amazing person who is the top of the business. So, of course, a smaller coach might then, or definitely would be, more available to you. Do you want to be able to access them? I offer my one-to-one clients WhatsApp access, so we can message or do voice notes and so on. Do you want a group element of being with other people who are in a similar business? And by the way, yes, do you want to work with other people who are all doing the same kind of thing? I want to work with lots of graphic designers in the group. Or do you want to be in a mix where you're challenged and you get inspiration from unexpected quarters and so on? And unfortunately, if things do go wrong, and again, I've heard of quite a few people, and I would say I haven't been burned yet as such. In a way, our brains are quite smart in that they kind of make any decision we make the right decision for us, unless it's disastrous, right? But obviously, if we're talking, and I've seen again in Facebook groups and so on, people talk about, I invested $25,000 and, they just ghosted me completely. That kind of thing is just, of course, unacceptable and terrible. But I hope that if we've done our due diligence and checked those referrals and T's and C's and whatever, then we feel comfortable. And I don't think we'd usually go from like a $0 investment in coaching to suddenly pay $100,000. I certainly started with some cheaper, shall we say, coaches who are starting out, and I've gradually increased my investments. If you're new, you might not go for the one that's like $75,000 per call or something like that. That might be a little bit too much too soon. But I was going to say, if and when you do invest in the wrong coach, unfortunately, I'm so sorry. However, learn from that mistake, right? If that's happened in the past, what went wrong? What did you not check? How did you sort of miss those signals? And I do think you would have picked up on something in the past, right? And maybe, by the way, maybe it's not the coach, to be fair to them. Maybe it's just the wrong time for you. Sometimes people sign up and then, things happen. You move house, you have kids, there's some illness in the family, and it just isn't the right time for you. And then, of course, you need to ask what's the kind of flexible policies and so on. And I think most coaches who are, have integrity and so on will be understanding of those things, of postponing and so on. But just to put that out there, that it might not necessarily be the coach's fault. And I guess that's the last thought to leave you with, of course, is that we can't do the work for you. So again, the clients I work with certainly would never blame me, I hope, for not getting the results, because they know that it's a lot of the responsibility is on their shoulders. But I will certainly do my utmost and help with accountability, help with inspiration, help with reassurance, help with knowledge, help with everything I have in my toolkit. And with that, and with somebody, if you do show up to the calls, if you ask me questions, if you hold me accountable, work through the materials, have the sessions with me, invest your time, invest your effort and so on, then, you certainly won't be disappointed. But I hope that was helpful. It's a really important question and something I'm constantly asking myself, how should I find somebody? And again, it's often a little bit fortuitous, serendipitous, I suppose, that you come across one of my coaches. I heard her on a podcast that I was on a week later, and then her webinar popped up, and then somebody referred me to her in a group as well. And that was sort of a little triangle of people pointing me in the same direction. I would certainly keep my eyes open for podcast guests and articles, maybe who's engaging on LinkedIn, whatever. And it doesn't mean you have to work with them, but just kind of keep your eye on them, follow them. And of course, if you have been listening to me for a while, then please take the next step if you haven't already. So of course, you can move from the podcast to the Facebook group. You can join me on the Accelerator Masterclass, the 5-day Escape Plan Challenge. You can join me on the workshops. I don't usually advertise so much the live events on the podcast because I want them to be evergreen, as it were. So the earlier episodes, I think I was kind of promoting things. But if you are in doubt, go to certainly the Facebook group, any of my channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, and so on. I'll be promoting things that are happening. And of course, the website, onestepoutside.com. And above all, if you're ready, when you're ready, then use the opportunity to get that free consult. So onestepoutside.com/call, onestepoutside.com/call. There are a few questions there for you to fill in. There's a couple of videos that will guide you on how the process works and so on. And then you can go ahead and book that call in, and no obligation. But again, use these opportunities to find out, am I the right coach for you? And I promise I'm experienced enough by now that I'm not going to say yes to you just because I'm sort of desperate to have my first client. The good news is I really will be clear if it's not a good fit for me, then, I would say that. So that's something else to look forward to or to expect. So thanks so much for listening. If you have a question, again, email at podcast@onestepoutside.com, and I'll see you back here next week. Bye for now.
Have you set yourself ambitious goals for your business and you now recognise that you'll need mentoring from someone who's been there, done that, and can guide you to focus on the right priorities? I can help you clarify your vision and get the foundations in place for long-term success. Get clear on your messaging and build a strong brand proposition, and improve your work-life balance as you achieve your business goals without sacrificing your health and relationships to do so. Apply for a free consultation at onestepoutside.com/free consultation. I look forward to hearing about your goals.